The headlines, Monday, the 19th of January, 2009. Today is the birthday of Pamela Frances Ball, born 1965 and died on the 14th of February 1978 of renal failure following a failed transplant of a kidney meant to correct a congenital defect. Not just a recession, Australia's economy is buggered. A leading economist forecaster has warned its clients to batten down the hatches for the sharpest deceleration of Australia's economy it has ever experienced. Obama's raring to go as the inauguration looms, but where will they run to? Gaza war, great victory for Palestinians, says Hamas, shows how much Hamas cares for Palestinian peoples. Brewers dodge alcopop tax and target teens. Driver 15 rams police car with Mercedes. Calls for bigger warnings on cigarette packets. On the comments front, from Piers Akerman, greenhouse gas or just a load of hot air? The rift between members of the Federal National Party and the Federal Liberal Party over strategy to deal with the Rudd Labour government's global warming policy should not be allowed to destroy coalition electoral hopes. In fact, it's not really a rift. Nazism is needed, according to Tim Blair. Images of yesterday's Hamas rally in Melbourne. You should see the picture. The Age's elevated shot doesn't reveal such a fascinating detail. AAP merely describes people carrying placards calling for an end of what was described as a massacre. Meanwhile, in Paris, vandals hurled Molotov cocktails at a synagogue in a Paris suburb yesterday in the latest outbreak of anti-Semitic violence in France since the start of Israel's Gaza offensive. Home to Europe's biggest Muslim and Jewish populations, France has recorded more than 55 anti-Semitic incidents since Israel launched its Gaza offensive last month, drawing appeals for calm from politicians and religious leaders. 3 other synagogues have been firebombed in the past 2 weeks, and vandals have sprayed anti-Israeli graffiti on at least 2 other Jewish places of worship. Jews have not been so vilified since Islamists attacked the US on 9/11. Green solutions. Compact fluorescent light bulbs that melt and burn, wind turbines that generate no power, energy recovery systems that zap mechanics, clean technology that creates toxins, hybrids that hate winter, canvas shopping bags that are made from polypropylene, biodiesel that clogs in cold weather, and now a solar-powered toilet that can't handle snow. The winter storm knocked out the prototype public toilet that was unveiled with great fanfare just a few weeks ago. Snow covered the restroom's roof-mounted solar panels, cutting off the flow of power to the storage batteries, which were completely drained and damaged. Toilets aren't a complicated or recent invention. It takes particular genius to build one that doesn't work. We have paid for Israel's failure. Melbourne Age columnist and Asian business expert Michael Bachmann unloads on evil Israel. If the residents of Bendigo started firing rockets into Melbourne, you'd expect Melbourne to retaliate. But what must Melbourne have done to Bendigo to make them do such a thing? Could be any number of root causes, really. Maybe someone in Melbourne drew cartoons that were disrespectful of Bendigo prophet Colleen Hewitt. Or perhaps Bendigo's charter simply demands Melbourne obliteration. At his leisure, Mr. Bachmann considers the problem of the Jew. Bachmann, this ran on the business pages, by the way, blames Israel for everything. Israel's utter inability to transform the Palestinians from enemies into friends has imposed big costs on us all. We have paid for Israel's failure with bombs on London public transport, bombs in bars in Bali, and even the loss of the World Trade Center's towers in New York. Do read the entire piece, which also includes the claim that young Israelis are rude, arrogant, and argue over trifling amounts of money even though they clearly have means. Survivors. Australia's Aborigines have survived here for 40,000 years or more, yet, according to Reuters, they are now threatened by a teensy temperature increase. Aborigines will feel the impact of climate warming more than other Australians, with their remote outback homes and generally poor health making them particularly vulnerable, a report said today. A reasonable case could be made that Australian Aborigines are the toughest people on Earth. You can't live through 400 centuries of climate change, plus more recent trauma, introduced European diseases and 19th century mass killings, without a certain resilience. As it happens, 2/3 of Aborigines now live in urban areas, yet the cited report is all nature boy nobly savagey. If the community-owned country land becomes sick through environmental degradation, climate impacts, or the inability of the traditional owners to fulfill cultural obligations through ongoing management and habitation of their land, the people of that land will feel this sickness themselves, it said. But are simple creatures who know not the ways of modernity, they commune with the rocks and trees. In other Indigenous news, Canadian Inuits have slapped down claims that polar bears are endangered. On one side, researchers told Federal Minister Jim Prentice that the bears would be virtually extinct in a century. On the other, Inuit leaders spoke of bear populations doubling over the past 50 years, proliferating to the point of becoming a pest in many northern communities. 40 or 50 years ago, our camping areas were not invaded by these animals, said Gabriel, Director of Wildlife for Nunavut Tungavik. The current population is stable. It is not constructive to exaggerate that situation. Well, that depends on one's aim. They are using the polar bear as a tool to fight climate change, said Harry Flaherty, chair of the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board. They shouldn't do that. The polar bear will survive. It has been surviving for thousands of years. Bonus gamed. A certain profession isn't the only beneficiary of Kevin Rudd's holiday handout. Poker machines won out with the federal government stimulus package, which has been blamed for a $15 million boost in revenue in Queensland. More than $167 million was spent playing poker machines in December, 10% above the previous month's $152 million. It was also significantly higher than the same period in 2007. All we need now is a report that pensioners brought crack with their bonus cash and we'll have all the major vices covered. And Fan Fisked. Robert Fisk, of all people, warns against exaggeration. Pro-Palestinian marchers should think twice before they start waffling about genocide when the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem once shook Hitler's hand and said in Berlin on the 2nd of November 1943 to be precise, the Germans know how to get rid of the Jews. They have definitely solved the Jewish problem. The Grand Mufti, it need hardly be added, was a Palestinian. Anthony Lowenstein, who is prone to citing genocide claims, will be devastated. Fisk is his hero. I'm not Jewish, although there are some in my family that are, and there's some in my family that aren't. I'm just one of the ones that aren't. My sister Pamela never grew up to know about the choices that she could have made. And I don't know what that choice might have been that she might have made had she had that opportunity as an adult. I became a Christian at the age of 18, soon after going to university. My parents were atheists. In all the walks of my life, having been involved with people that are atheist, having been involved with people that are agnostic, with Christians, having friends that are Muslim, having friends that are Jewish, having friends that are Buddhist and Hindu, I've never once come across one friend of mine who would in any way endorse or support the violence that terrorisms impart on people. What Hamas does is unacceptable. And yet, outrageously, what Hamas does often seems to be endorsed by the United Nations. Hamas is not the only problem in the world which seems to be endorsed by the United Nations. But there aren't that many successful things that are supported by the United Nations to lead me to believe that the United Nations is doing a good job or doing a worthwhile job. I want the United Nations. I want it to be successful. But I don't see it being successful the way that it is run now.